With its booming population, London is rapidly running out of burial space, which means more and more people have to travel miles across the capital to visit the graves of their loved ones. What can be done to free up more burial space? Well, one East End cemetery has come up with a novel solution, as London historian Catherine Cartwright discovered.
This is St Bride's Churchyard, just behind Fleet Street. In the 17th century, the great diarist Samuel Pepys recalls the vicar jostling together other bodies in the crypt to make room for his dead brother. At the time, the City of London had, within 1 square mile, over 80 churchyards, like this one here, with small graveyards. They were overflowing, though, with 8 centuries worth of dead city residents. So it became common practice to just dig graves on top of graves to ensure everybody fit in. You can see by the height of this how deep they dug to fit all those bodies in. They piled body onto body and even dug some up so they could start again. But these conditions were deemed horrific, and it led to the Burial Acts, one of which, passed in 1857, forbade graves being exhumed for reuse, so they needed more space. In the Victorian era, it got even more crowded when the population expanded from 1 to 7 million. So in 1854, they built this wonderful 200-acre cemetery to house the City of London's dead. It sits right in the heart of East London at Manor Park and is now a beautiful Grade 1 listed landscape and is one of the largest municipal cemeteries in Europe. It's run by Gary Burks, who knows every corner of it.
This place was my home from the age of about 6 years old, so I grew up here. My father moved us here in 1971 when I was 6. He worked here as a gardener. And since then, it's been my home and then eventually my place of work, and now both.
And is this your house here?
It was, yes. I grew up here. My parents sort of stayed here until they passed away.
What was it like growing up in a cemetery?
I suppose because I was 6 years old, it was normal to me. It's just only just recently it struck me more that I am a bit weird.
So you lived here all your life, you must know a lot about the history of the place.
I know a lump about the history. I know some of the famous people that are in here.
Like who?
I suppose the one that comes to mind first is Bobby Moore, the England captain for the 1966 World Cup. And 2 of Jack the Ripper's victims, Catherine Eddowes and Mary Ann Nichols.
The cemetery is nearly 160 years old and still has funerals nearly every day. So guess what?
We've carried out 500,000 burials and we are running out of space.
And the same story seems to be true all over London.
Local authorities face the same pressure. Their cemeteries are becoming full. They can't find new land for new cemeteries, even if they could afford new land in London, if it were available.
Most of the cemeteries that have been open some time are struggling for space. Newham doesn't have another cemetery. Waltham Forest struggles with burial space. Hackney has very little burial space. And Tower Hamlets has no burial space.
If the borough where you live has unfortunately run out of burial space and you have to go to a neighbouring borough, you could pay double or treble the fees because you're not a resident of that borough.
So something had to change. And with land in the capital at a premium, the answer was obvious.
The only way to make cemeteries viable is to turn the clock back 150 years and reintroduce the reuse of graves, which happens in most European countries and many countries around the world.
A bylaw that only affects some of London's cemeteries means that grave sharing is now allowed here. And that's exactly what they're doing.
We have to highlight the graves that have not received a burial in over 75 years and that have space remaining in them for at least one burial. We have to then do some research, write to any owners of the grave If there isn't a living owner or a possible living owner, then we would then put a notification in the newspapers, notification at the cemetery entrance, exit, and in the area where we're going to reclaim the graves. Then we have to sit back and wait for 6 months, and if anyone has an objection, they can write to us. Part of the legislation says if a living relative objects, then that grave is passed over for at least one generation. You open the grave, you dig down. If you find any remains, then you put them into a container and you bury them deeper within the grave, at the bottom of the grave, effectively. Most of the time we would not find any remains.
This grave is being opened for the first time since 1890. There were no mechanical diggers around then, so grave diggers, just armed with shovels, must have had a right job to dig this deep. Their hard work, though, meant that they left plenty of room above for shared use now.
Just there's a grave that was reused a year ago, so that's quite a recent one. Using this as an example, the previous interments were set over 75 years ago. We reclaimed the right to burial on the grave. We have depth remaining to place more people in the grave, and this family purchased the grave for future burial. So there's someone went in there in May 2013. We cleaned and renovated the grave and turned the memorial around so that there is room for further inscriptions on an area that is now the front of the grave, which was originally the back of the headstone.
New name on the front, the old names stay on the back, so history is preserved. But at the moment, this cemetery is one of only a very few trying out these old ways again. So what's stopping the rest of London?
The only legislation that exists for the reuse of graves exists and is available only to local authorities in London. So that excludes private cemeteries, it excludes church burial grounds, and it excludes every burial ground in England apart from London. What we'd like to see is a reuse legislation that covers all burial grounds.
Revised legislation could allow many to follow this cemetery's lead of recycling graves. There's also a financial advantage for families wishing to bury their loved ones in this way. Whoever chooses this space, what kind of savings are they going to make?
If a family chooses this particular grave, a virgin grave, a grave that's never been used before, of the same size, would probably be twice the amount of money.
Oh, goodness.
And of course then they'd have to put a memorial on it, whereas the memorial's already there. They become the trustee of that memorial. So there's a significant saving. If I had to put a figure on it at the moment, it'd probably be about £6,000 of saving.
When I first heard about this idea, there seemed to be something a bit spooky about it. But actually, it makes perfect sense. After all, we can't keep expanding our cities forever. And actually, it's quite reassuring to think that once we're dead, we're not going to be using up valuable land, but sharing graves already in use with new friends.